So some time ago, a friend of mine had loaned me his copy of Firefly for the Atari 2600 video computer system, otherwise known as the game that Classic Game Room had dubbed E.T. for Extra Terrible. Obviously, Mark Bussler was right on the money with that one, and I had threatened my friend for the dirty deed of loaning me such a horrific Atari video game. However, I have since decided to spare his life when he loaned me another game from his collection, and this is one of the harder finds and one that I had an interest in sampling for myself. And so, ladies and gentlemen, for today's video review, the 150th video review to be posted on this channel I've made a big deal out of for whatever reason, we'll be looking at Caravan Shooting Collection for the Super Famicom, a Japanese-only release containing 3 Famicom games: Star Force, Star Soldier, and Starship Hector 87. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with Hudson Soft lore, like I am unfamiliar with Hudson Soft lore, back in the mid to late 1980s, Hudson Soft would have these caravan tours in a bus or something. Basically a showcase of some of their upcoming or current games or whatever the case may be, but also have these little competitions of who could score more or something to that extent. I'm sure you could find more information on these things elsewhere. It's just something I thought I'd throw out there for whatever reason, but let's just look at the collection itself. When you start up Caravan Shooting Collection, you open up with a 16-bit title screen along with 16-bit happy music, a pleasing melody if you will. Proceeding onwards, upon pressing a button, you get a rather nice and vibrant menu showcasing the 3 games available to be played. Beyond that, however, once you get to the actual games themselves, it's 8-bit Famicom graphics with 8-bit Famicom sounds. And that is all you're pretty much getting from this shooting collection. 3 ancient Famicom shooters from the 1980s as originally presented, bundled up, and packaged in one Super Famicom cartridge without any enhancements or anything of the sort. So if you were expecting a collection of 8-bit shooters upgraded to 16-bit standards, similar to the treatment received by compilations such as Super Mario All-Stars or Mega Man The Wily Wars, then you're not going to be getting that here. You're just getting a repackage of 3 old NES games. Let's take a quick sample at these 3 games. You have Star Force, released in 1985 by Tecmo. This is a pretty straightforward vertical scrolling shooter with nothing of note. You fly through levels, you shoot things, you blow them up, and you face off against the boss, which is a random glowing object identified by the letter of the alphabet. Pretty bare bones, nothing special, but good times had by all. Obviously, this version of Star Force included here is based on the arcade faithful Famicom version, and not the localized NES version, which got a few minor upgrades in graphics and sound, believe it or not. Next up, you have Star Soldier, released in 1986 by Hudson Soft, another straightforward vertical scrolling shooter that is pretty much a derivative of the previous Star Force, with additional firepower, but would serve as the basis for much superior sequels, such as Super Star Soldier and Soldier Blade, among others. And instead of random letters and glowing objects, you're fighting star brains for bosses. How riveting. Again, it's nothing special, but good fun for a lark if nothing else. And finally, we have Starship Hector, or Hector 87, released in 1987, also by Hudson Soft, and the most advanced of the 3 games, with alternating vertical and horizontal scrolling levels and gameplay similar to the Namco arcade classic Xevious. It is also the prettiest looking of the 3 games, but that's probably due to the benefit of being the newer of the 3 games. Just to foreshadow the bare-bones nature of the overall package that is Caravan Shooting Collection, Hector 87 is the only game of the 3 to feature the 2-minute and 5-minute point challenge modes that are supposed to be a hallmark in these Caravan competitions. Neither Star Force nor Star Soldier boast any such modes, and no effort was made to add them to the 2 older games. A shame, really. And those are your 3 games. As stated, these are all games that originally appeared on the Nintendo Famicom Entertainment System, whatever you want to call it, and are converted and presented as such here. For some, this might be a disappointment that these games did not get an updated 16-bit overhaul. Hell, you could have made a point to at least convert the arcade version of Star Force into the Super Famicom format, but they decided to go with the Famicom version, I guess, to match up with the rest, I suppose. I don't know why, honestly don't care, has no relevance overall. But setting aside whatever disappointment will result from archaic looking video games for anyone that cares for that sort of thing, the games are actually nicely preserved in their original format. That is to say, they look and sound like the original Famicom versions as opposed to some poorly replicated version that would feature glaring faults in conversion. Okay, so there's a bit of an echo when it comes to the sound quality, and people will claim it's an improvement of some kind, but still, it's almost note for note the same as what you would get out of the original 8-bit hardware. Also, the graphics in these three games match those of the Famicom originals. There's notably less slowdown, but that's about it. There's supposed to be slightly less flicker, and it's somewhat kinda noticeable, but Star Force still has the garbage forming on top of the screen as a result of the scrolling. Hector 87's still a pretty flicker-heavy game. Aside from that though, there's nothing really of merit to bring up. It's 8-bit, looks as good as it did on the Famicom, can't really say much more than that. They look the part, they sound the part, and they even play the part. Control is about as good as the original Famicom ports, which is good because you have to be a complete idiot to screw up the controls, and they didn't. And in that regard, there are no complaints. In fact, if there was any major complaint to be had, and even this is somewhat meager and feeble, then it would simply be the fact that nothing was done to drastically enhance the games to the level of the aforementioned Super Mario All-Stars or the like. The enhancements applied here are merely subtle at best. Flicker is somewhat less prevalent, with some exception. There's virtually little to no slowdown to be found. A bit of an echo with the sound, but that's about it. And if you're going into this expecting a 16-bit reimagining of 3 old games, you're going to be disappointed because that isn't the point of this collection. Truthfully, Caravan Shooting Collection is not a worthwhile purchase if you're just looking to get your hands on a collection of what is ostensibly 3 NES space shooters. I mean, you'd probably be better off finding the individual cartridges, all things considered. It's much easier to find and less costly in the long run. Instead, Caravan Shooting Collection serves more as a collectible curiosity, something to have in the collection for the sole purpose of bragging rights, just so you could say, yeah, I have that. Something that my friend who loaned me his copy, for the purposes of this review, can attest to. In that regard, for the sole purpose of collectible curiosity, it's probably worth checking out if you could find a copy and afford it. If all you want are more NES shooters, you might as well swipe the original carts instead. This one in particular is for collectors more than anything.